Are you going to actively campaign for President Trump?
Yes, I will.
Okay. So I may be sitting here talking to the one person in this country that is going to pick the next president of the United States by
That
what you
is
did today.
possible. That is possible.
It certainly is.
Well, the political world is rocked today. We are entering a very different presidential election than we did last time we saw each other on Friday. It was officially done in the afternoon. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., as we discussed all week, we anticipated, we speculated, he did it. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. officially withdrew from the presidential election and threw his support to Donald Trump. Later that evening, he even showed up at a Trump rally in Phoenix, on stage with him, touting his new campaign slogan, Make America Healthy Again. That's what Robert F. Kennedy is going to be focusing on. He gave 3 reasons why he decided to do this. The first one had to do with the First Amendment free speech and freedom of expression, because he has been canceled, he's been censored, he's been deleted by social media companies colluding with the Biden administration and with the Democratic Party, and the mainstream media colluded with Kamala Harris to keep him out of any television interviews, out of any television debates, off of the ballot. And he's been having to fight in court with legal battle after legal battle after legal battle against Kamala Harris and the Democrats to even be on the ballot. And he said, enough is enough. The party that I grew up with, that I was born into with the name Kennedy, used to be the party of freedom and liberty and human rights and civil rights and free expression, and not anymore. Now they're the authoritarians. That was number one. Number two, he believes that our policies in Ukraine are misguided, expensive, and we need to be marching toward peace. And no one in the Biden administration or the Democratic Party are interested in having any conversations about peace and ending this war. He believes Donald Trump will move us in that direction. And number three, he takes the issues of chronic disease for children and poor nutrition in this country, childhood obesity, the fact that our agriculture industry is run by a few small corporations and dominated by foreign interests now. He thinks that's wrong. He thinks that we shouldn't be importing cattle and pork and other livestock in this country, that we in our America's breadbasket should be able to raise our own farm goods, grow our own crops, and be as agriculturally independent as we could be energy independent. Those are his 3 main goals. And if that's all he's going to focus on, I think I'm pretty okay with it. Keep him out of the EPA, keep him away from fossil fuel policies, let us drill, baby, drill. And I think this will work out. He sat with Dr. Phil for an exclusive interview about this. And some highlights here, I think, are, well, they're telling for where we're headed right now in this new unity party.
Do you think you can be the determining factor in this presidential election?
What I've done, or taken my name off the ballots in 10 states that are swing states. We recognize from our polling is that if I stayed in the race, it would have almost certainly swung the race to Vice President Harris. I did not want to give the election. I didn't think it would be right to give the election to her. If I got out of the race, 57% of the people who are supporting me would vote for Trump. Our decision, or my decision about what to do, I think is it's much more likely that President Trump will get elected.
So you do acknowledge that?
Yes.
Are you going to actively campaign for President Trump?
Yes, I will.
So I may be sitting here talking to the one person in this country that is going to pick the next president of the United States.
That is possible.
And let me tell you something. The internal numbers that the Trump campaign released Friday evening supports exactly what Bobby Kennedy said there. Understand, he's only pulling his name off of the ballot in 10 key battleground states. And the Trump-Vance campaign released data on 7 of those states. In Arizona right now, RFK Jr. is pulling 5% of the vote. Now, of that 5% of the vote, some people are going to go to Kamala Harris because I think, they're probably naturally Democrats, right? That's why they wanted to go with Kennedy. There's another percentage that's going to go to Donald Trump. And then there's another percentage who will probably remain undecided or maybe won't vote at all because they're so disenchanted by the process now. So as you take those numbers, you want to find out what the net gain is for one candidate or the other, right? This many goes to Trump, this many goes to Harris or doesn't vote at all, who has the net benefit. According to the analysis done by the Trump-Vance campaign, in Arizona, 5% of the current vote that is assigned for RFK, he ends up with a plus 25% net gain. In the state of Arizona, that locks Arizona up. It's over. Arizona's done. Let's move on down the column to North Carolina. There's only 3% of the vote there, and 36% of that Kennedy vote goes to Trump. That locks North Carolina. And North Carolina is pretty much done now anyway, but that absolutely takes North Carolina off. Over in Georgia, 3% of the vote currently is going to RFK. And right now, Trump's leading by about 1 or 2%. He then gets a net 13% of what RFK is sitting on. Again, locks Georgia in right there. Not only does it win it for Trump in these 3 states that I just highlighted, but it actually moves the needle far enough, in my opinion, that it's too big a margin for them to jerk around with on election night and the next couple of nights. Let's move to Nevada. I'm doing these states in particular on purpose, all right? Nevada, right now, Trump is up by like 4 points, I think. Kennedy right now has about 4 points himself in Nevada. Trump is now estimated to net 50% of that vote into his column. That takes Nevada off the map too. Okay, so those 4, Arizona, North Carolina, Georgia, and Nevada. Those 4 states that Trump lost in 2020, or let's just more accurately say, were awarded to Joe Biden in 2020, those 4 states, those go to Trump's column. At that point, all Trump needs is 1 of 3 states. He needs Wisconsin or Michigan or Pennsylvania. All he needs is 1 of them at this point, and he's the president of the United States. Let's start with Michigan. Michigan right now, Kennedy has 4% of the vote. This is the tightest one in terms of Kennedy voters going to Trump or Harris. He still does well, but not too well. He only gets about 2% net of the vote there. So it's hard to say whether that's going to be a difference maker or not. Let's move to Pennsylvania. Right now, Kennedy is getting 4% of the vote in Pennsylvania. It breaks better for Trump here, where he will gain 13%, a net 13% of the vote, which will help him, probably put him over in Pennsylvania, but I don't trust that state. Now let's look at Wisconsin. Once again, in Wisconsin, Kennedy is sitting at 4% of the vote. The way the analysis breaks down right now, Donald Trump will get 30% net of that Kennedy vote, and that puts Wisconsin over the top, way over the top, in fact. But then there's another missing factor here, and that is the undecided vote. There are still undecided voters. And I'm going to tell you something. There is a psychological effect of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the ranking scion of the Kennedy Democrat dynasty, stepping up and appearing on a MAGA stage with Donald Trump and saying, no, this guy's okay. He's better than Kamala Harris. There is something, there will be an effect that that Robert Kennedy Jr. and soon to be other Democrat leaders are starting to now publicly say, yeah, you know what? Trump's not the guy that everyone's been saying he is. There will be a socially acceptable trend to say, listen, I'm voting for Trump. In fact, coming from the entertainment business where I used to work, there are a whole lot like Rob Schneider, comedian Rob Schneider, Mike Binder. There's a whole bunch of Hollywood types who were big Kennedy supporters who now over the weekend have said, okay, I'm voting for Trump. That's how pissed off they are at Kamala Harris and the Democrats. And these are like stand-up comedians. These are people who do movies. There's this thing in Hollywood. We used to joke around all the time as a Republican because there are very few out-of-the-closet Republicans in Hollywood, right? I used to work there. It was my old industry. Drew Carey. You know Drew Carey, Price is Right? He always used to say, I'm a libertarian. I'm a libertarian. Who else? There's a bunch. Adam Carolla used to say he was a libertarian. Adam Sandler used to say he was a libertarian. These actors who don't affiliate themselves with left-wing politics, but they can't come out and say they're Republican. So they say, well, I'm a libertarian. I'm a libertarian. Whenever I would see an actor or a stand-up comedian or somebody in Hollywood say they were a libertarian, I'd be like, oh, okay, you're a Republican. You're a Republican. You just can't say it. I understand. Well, this is the trend this year. Here's what people are going to say and say, well, I was supporting Kennedy. I was all in for Bobby. And now, you know what? I'm going to vote for Trump. There is this psychological benefit of Kennedy doing this in such a public way and then being attacked by his own family members, being attacked by the Democrats, being attacked by the media. He is wearing all of these wounds in public and showing how divided our nation is right now because of politics. And he's fine taking those hits because he thinks it's worth it. And other individuals who are watching the political conversation in this country sees Bobby Kennedy being trashed by his own family members, and we see this sign of recognition in our own lives. It's like, my God, I've seen this happen in my own family. I've seen children disavow their parents. I've seen brothers disavow sisters. I've seen marriages broken up over politics. Enough is enough. If Bobby Kennedy can do this, so can I. I'm telling you, this could be the beginning of something very big, a very big momentum shift. Because when you destigmatize Donald Trump, which Bobby Kennedy did on Friday, when you destigmatize him, then a lot of people will come crawling out saying, yeah, you know what? I'm going to vote for Trump too. I'm going to vote for Trump too. Donald Trump himself sat down with Dr. Phil as well and discussed the Kennedy endorsement.
RFK Jr. has offered his support to you and your campaign.
I'm very honored by it. He's a very smart guy, a different kind of a guy, loves our country, has some, I think, very good views on a lot of different things. And I've known him for a long time. We've been somewhat friendly, actually. And I think he's going to be a great asset. Will I have him in the administration? It's possible. We haven't really discussed that, but it's possible. I think he adds a lot to the election. He's got a good following, tremendous following.
He does have a very tremendous following and a loyal following. And the media can't ignore him anymore. They really can't. Especially if Trump, if they say, hey, we'd like Trump to do an interview. Nah, but we got a surrogate for you. Who, Vance? Nope, Kennedy. Go ahead. What are they going to do? What are they going to say? And the more they try to attack him, the more they try to destroy him, they actually reinforce the realization that Trump has been treated unfairly, shabbily, and they'll even do this to Kennedy. Because everybody knows that if he had dropped out and endorsed Kamala, he'd be a hero. Everybody knows. He's the same man. He just endorsed Donald Trump. How bad is it looking now for the Democrats? Kennedy has alluded that there will be more Democrats following suit. I wonder what he knows that the rest of us don't know. Very left-wing liberal Jill Stein, who has sort of played the spoiler for the Green Party a little bit here, whittling away a little bit at the Democrats. Hillary Clinton thinks Jill Stein was a big part of her losing in 2016 because, well, Russian asset and everything. She took to the X platform and said, we may disagree with RFK Jr. about many things, but he's right about how the Democratic Party uses lawfare and dirty tricks to suppress Democratic competition and voter choice. The Dems preach about saving democracy, but in reality, they're working overtime to stamp it out. This is such an important narrative for Trump and for Republicans. Have you noticed that you don't hear that from them much anymore? This was one of Biden's big talking points, right? But Kamala, at the DNC last week, did you notice? I mean, other than Project 2025, you didn't hear much about how this election will be the last election we ever have. He's a threat to our democracy. We'll never have another free election in the future. They know that that's not working anymore. And if they try it, they've got Bobby Kennedy and Jill Stein to the left of the Democrat Party stepping up saying, no, you guys are the ones who are threatening our democracy. You guys are the ones who are making elections unfair and rigged. So it's not just Trump up there saying it. All right, one more Democrat. This guy is Brett Weinstein. He was on what's his name?
Patrick Bet David.
Bet David, thank you. Patrick Bet David podcast. And what he had to say as a Democrat, lifelong Democrat, voted Democrat his entire life. What he had to say about the Bobby Kennedy shift is really insightful.
How big you think, one, this is? Him stepping aside, him not being in the battlegrounds, him supporting Trump, and him trashing the Democratic Party that he left?
Well, I think this is absolutely monumental because I think we are in a novel moment in American political history where many of us who hold different positions on the political spectrum, have different priorities with respect to policy, are finding that none of our differences matter in light of the jeopardy that the republic is in. And so what he is effectively doing here is he is saying those differences aren't going away, but they're just simply secondary. And he is both structurally, by withdrawing from certain ballots and not others, he is emboldening a movement that is more widely recognizing that those differences have to be put aside until the main job is done. And he's leaving himself an important voice in that discussion. So I was very interested in the way he navigated the idea. This was not a simple endorsement of Trump. This was an endorsement of retaking the White House and using that position to restore the republic to its proper course.
A couple of weeks ago, the Trump-Rogan feud, right? Hey, Rogan said good things about RFK.
Yep.
And then Trump comes back and says, I wonder what the booze you're going to get when you get to UFC. Then Rogan posts a picture with him and who was a comedian that was Trump. And
Shane Gillis,
and says, hey, we made up, we're good. And that picture goes viral. And now 2 weeks later, RFK says this. Does he having a position or endorsing Trump, does this cause a guy like you to be open to the idea of voting for Trump versus Kamala?
Oh, absolutely. Let me just be perfectly clear about this. I think the modern Democratic Party is an existential threat to the republic. And although I am a Democrat, I've been a Democrat my whole life, the party that I see in front of me today is literally the inverse of the party I signed up for. This is now the party of war. This is the party of racism. This is the party of censorship. I don't recognize this party. There is no conceivable scenario in which I would vote for Kamala Harris. I just simply will not do it. Am I open to voting for Trump? I am. I'm especially open to it if he is partnered with Bobby Kennedy, because what that tells me is that my values, which are a much closer match for Bobby's, are represented in that administration. And that's really what I want. I want a coalition to redefine American politics because, frankly, we have a long-standing problem with corruption, which has now turned into something else with the modern Democratic Party. But we need to rethink the way we govern ourselves so that corruption is not the dominant force. And a coalition is the way we're going to do that.
Do you see what's happening here? This truly is historic. We're watching this. We have a front row seat. American politics is going through a major shift right now. And trust me, as a Reagan Republican conservative, it's unnerving for me as well. Okay. I get it. For those of you who are worried, and it's like, what do you mean? What are we doing here? Why are we giving Bobby Kennedy a seat at the table? The guy's like, wants to sue every major oil company. He's like, wants us all to go to windmills and solar panels. And, I get it. But let's be real for a minute. The Democratic Party, along with the coalitions that they have built and dominated and owned in the deep state bureaucracy of Washington, D.C., and all of the federal agencies that they control and the nefarious things that those agencies have done over the last several years that we've seen, along with their satanic pact with Hollywood and the pop culture and the music industry and academia and the news media and any journalistic outlets, plus add to that big tech and their ability to control speech to a certain extent. It's going to take a coalition of Americans to find common ground on a handful of incredibly important things to defeat this behemoth. And if that means Bobby Kennedy setting aside all the things he disagrees with Donald Trump and saying, okay, if we can focus on this, this, and this, and by joining forces with you, I at least get a seat at the table on these things, It's worth it. Let's do it. And then academics and smart liberals like Brett Weinstein sees that and say, oh, okay, something's happening here. And see, we're not going to have a seat at Kamala Harris's table. And up until now, we're not going to have a seat. But if we just get a seat at the table and our voice can be heard and we're not going to be silenced and we're not going to be shoved aside, then yes, it's worth it. This is what other countries do. A lot of people decry the two-party system in America, and I get it. It's frustrating. It's also allowed us to be quite stable relative to other countries that utilize a democracy for selecting their elected officials. If we had a multi-party parliamentarian system like in Italy or France or England or Israel, there'd be coalitions forming all the time. Because when you've got multiple parties, it's very hard to get 50% plus one. Well, that's what you're witnessing right now. You're witnessing a coalition party being formed where, yes, there are divergent ideas about a lot of things. I want to sit with Bobby Kennedy and say, you're worried about children's health? How about we stop mutilating children's genitals? Could we do that, please? Could you get on board with that? But if we can isolate a small handful of priorities that finally reins this system back that's been destroying us more rapidly than ever, then maybe that's what we need to do. And I guess it gets down to just one thing. I mean, what else are we going to do? The fact of the matter is, if you support Donald Trump and the Republican Party and you want to defeat Kamala Harris and the Democrats, the way just got a lot easier for you after this move. Are you concerned about what that coalition government looks like? Good. You should be, because you shouldn't trust any politician, no matter who they are and no matter what party they're with. And should Donald Trump win partly because of the unity that he's formed with Bobby Kennedy, then it is incumbent on us to hold them accountable to make sure that they don't go astray from what they told us they were going to do. And I'd love to be in a position to have to do that, because if we are in that position, it means Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and the corrupt Democrat Party have been taken out of power. And all of the investigations, all of the cleaning house, all of the stripping of power of the federal government and the executive branch can begin. This time with Bobby Kennedy on board as well. That's not a bad scenario. Not bad at all.